What is up, guys? Frosty Austy 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. Today we have another one of our Bifrost team members, the amazing, the wonderful Loki teen. So if you haven't seen a Frosty feature before, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your humble scribe, your historian, whatever you want to say. I'm going to tell you about Loki teen. It's a little weird, and we're going to get into it. So, without much ado, let's go. According to Scopely, after manipulating Norman Osborn into leading a massive attack on Asgard, Loki realized his plans had gone too far. But when he attempted to stop the invasion, he was killed by a blast caused by the Sentry. However, before the attack, Loki had persuaded Hela to remove his name from the Book of Hell, allowing himself to be reborn instead of truly dying. Thor eventually found his reborn, now teenage brother, living in France. We're gonna go into this. This will be a point of contention for me. Because he's called Loki Teen. Let's just go. That is Loki and his reincarnated, by artist it changes, obviously, but I really like this one, but that's his reincarnated teenage self. Name, Loki Laufey's son. He is the son of Laufey, the Frost Giant King. He's got the same name as the regular Loki. So, yeah. We're gonna go in through the whole thing, but this is a reincarnation of the 616 Loki, and in doing this reincarnation, we more or less create two Lokis in the Prime universe. So typically in Frost Features, by the way, we stick to the 616 canon, so all of this is in the 616 canon. It's just kind of confusing. First appearance, Thor number 617 in 2010. Yeah. Powers and abilities. Frost Giant physiology, even though it's less so than regular Loki. Sorcery, but to a small degree. We find, when we meet, I'm just going to say it. I've been waiting, but I'm just going to say it now. He is not Loki Teen, and he is not Loki. This is Kid Loki. Kid Loki from the comics. The background in the According to Scopely is Kid Loki from the comics. It is not the Loki from the MCU. That Loki, that is the Teen Loki, and Teen Loki is the one with the alligator. Loki also has a pet companion. Kid Loki has a pet companion we'll talk about in a minute, but it's not the alligator. The alligator's from the MCU. I don't know. We'll hit it. But anyway, we find this is a reincarnated, a rebirthed Loki who doesn't know who he is, so even in learning who he is, he's only a fraction of the power of the true Loki, and he has to kind of relearn. He has to relearn or learn from the beginning everything. So it's quite different than the typical Ragnarok cycle. Aliases. So his name in this reincarnated body is French. I'm gonna say this wrong. There's no way I'm gonna say it correct. It's Sarur, but people refer to him as Kid Loki. There's a situation where he is also known as Luke, and Hela is his essentially foster mom, under the name of Helen. Affiliations: Asgardians of the Galaxy, and most notably the Young Avengers. We don't have him in Young Avengers in Marvel Strike Force. He would have been a fantastic addition. Really, yeah, much more in the Young Avengers than anything else. Asgardians of the Galaxy is a little bit more current. Who died? He did. So, if you check out Frosty Features Sylvie, we talk about Loki's death at the hands of the Void. We're going to talk about that a lot more in detail today, because then it was how that affected Lady Loki. In this, we're talking about how his death at the hands of the Void becomes how Kid Loki is born, right? So his death, you can't be a superhero or supervillain without somebody dying. His own death leads to his creation, more or less. Not more or less, literally, directly. Background: Parisian. He is born in Paris, France. he is born in, yeah, he's born in Paris, France. After his rebirth, his death, what we see when he dies is the very first time Loki truly dies. He's not reborn as Loki with all of his knowledge or whatever. This is the first time we see Loki truly die in the comic book. So the fact, as according to Scopely pointed out, he creates his own loophole to come back, but he comes back and it doesn't quite work out the way he wants it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, he is Parisian, and he is adopted as an Asgardian from there, instead of, taken as a baby from the Frost Giants. Dreams of never growing old. So down here, I like to put down interesting facts about the characters. So with Kid Loki, there's a couple really interesting facts. So Kid Loki is afraid of getting old, right? And one thing I find very interesting, very cool about that is a very prominent character in Marvel Strike Force is Kang the Conqueror. When you look at Iron Lad, if you go to Frosty Features Kang, we talk about Iron Lad and his background, and he does not want to grow into his future self. Kid Loki is the exact same way. He actually even meets his future self, just like Kang, and is essentially, hey, if you listen to me, if you do what I say, you're gonna get all your powers back and return to normal. And Kid Loki's like, F that, son. I don't want to grow up to be you. I want to be a good guy. So whereas Loki is sort of an anti-hero, he goes back and forth. Kid Loki has no intention. He has villainous, mischievous, we'll call them, attributes, but he is not truly the evil bit that Loki is. He has more of a conscience starting out, and so he does not want to grow into his own self. He doesn't, and he also just doesn't physically want to grow old, right? He very much wants to kind of pull a Peter Pan. Kind of wants to keep the Peter Pan thing going and stay that same age. So Kid Loki is actually a very appropriate thing. So Kid Loki also has this thing where he he has a lot of animal companions randomly, but there's a storyline where regular Loki gets a bunch of hellhounds and he passes them out to like Hela, Mephisto. For some reason, he decides to put one on Earth in a pound, and he keeps one, and it's the one that no one would take. I think maybe, Adam Warlock, I think, gets one, or Warlock gets one. But there's one that nobody will take. It's the most deadly or whatever, and it is this giant hellhound. He names him Thori. But what I find super cool about that, so this is as he is Kid Loki. His memory is wiped, right? And he sees this as just like a really kind of vicious dog. This dog talks, by the way. So Thori shows up a lot with Kid Loki stories. And it's kind of cool because eventually after Loki meets Thor and he starts getting some of his memories or some of the background of who he's supposed to be, Thor's like, why'd you name that dog after me? And Loki's like, I didn't name it after you. It was another Thor. But the cool thing about it is when he names, it just shows that brotherly love, right? When he names Thori, he actually has no recollection of his past. So him calling out Thor or what have you to name that dog was his only retention from like his soul or whatever from his past life that he has no memory of. I find that really fun that's his adopted brother, and he respects him. We'll talk about that so much. But he respects Thor a lot, essentially, when he dies. And he it's a very famous comic book saying, I'm sorry, brother, right? So he names this hellhound that he finds, just random dog, more or less, and he names it Thori, not knowing that it's a reference to his adopted brother. It's cool. It's really neat. Yeah, I like that a lot. Moving on. Relatives. By now, there's so many Lokis. We've talked about Loki's relatives multiple times. So I cut it down here a little bit, but we've got Odin and Frigga as adopted parents. Laufey and Fabuti is, I probably said that wrong, are his actual parents, the Frost Giants. And then Thor, Balder, Herman, Vidar, and Tyr are all adopted brothers. And there's more. He's got a lot of sons. He's got a lot of reincarnations. Bunch of relationships. It's just a thing that happens. Okay, so let's talk about notable events. So Siege. So all of this is set up. We talked about it a little bit with the Frosty Future Sylvie, we're going to hit it a lot harder now because this is a direct correlation as to why Kid Loki's exists, and that is the Siege event in the comics. So with Siege, we talked about after a Skrull invasion, Norman Osborn is one that is tipped off to the Skrulls before Tony Stark, and so Norman Osborn becomes the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Tony Stark is ousted. Siege is the event where we see essentially everything catching up to Norman Osborn, and we get out of that situation with the Dark Avengers and stuff like that. So in Sylvie, we talked about the actions of the Dark Avengers and all that kind of stuff. This is the end of all of it, so it's sort of a continuation. Perfect thing to follow for us if you just see it, Sylvie. So, at the end of the day, Loki is, especially in this time period, he's still kind of going back and forth between being a villain, being a hero. In Siege, he starts off as a villain because he is like, well, it is straight up disrespectful that my Asgard is on Earth, right? So this is after Ragnarok. They all died and came back, and Loki is brought back. We talked about that in a different Bifrost episode. I think it was Beta Ray Bill. They all came back, and then Asgard is rebuilt on Earth, right? So Loki thinks that it is disrespectful for Asgard. Asgard's one of the 9 realms, right? It is not just some city that can be put up here, and all of these gods should not be living among these common people, right? So Loki is like, if I convince S.H.I.E.L.D. to attack Asgard, they're gonna bring a little tiny thing, and all the Asgardians gonna be like, oh, all these Earth people hate us, we need to move somewhere else, so that ultimately Loki's goal is to put Asgard as part of the 9 realms. So his decision, he's like, I'm gonna go tell Norman that, the Asgards are up to some stuff, y'all need to attack him. And Norman, being kind of blood hungry or whatever, he's like, absolutely. And not only am I going to attack Asgard, I'm going to go for it. Excuse me, I had to bleep that out. He's like, I'm going for it. I'm going to 100% attack, like full bar, not worry about it at all. We're going to attack Asgard. And Loki thought it was going to be sort of a very small situation, like not even have to worry about it type thing. And then he sends essentially the full Avengers to attack the Dark Avengers. And then at this time we have Robert Reynolds, who is the Sentry. He is not having a good time as far as, so the whole thing, one of the things with Sentry is he battles this dark side. And so what the Void is essentially all of his fears and insecurities manifest, right? And Sentry is extremely powerful, right? Sentry has taken on his own, right? The Void actually has taken on by himself at the same time the Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, etc. So in Norman's sending of the Sentry and him dealing with the Void, he sends the Void and a whole army of people to attack Asgard. And when Loki kind of sees this going on and the utter decimation that's coming with it, Loki's like, oh crap, this isn't what I wanted. This went too far. He didn't expect it to have such a big thing. So then you see Loki acquire the Norn Stones. So the Norn Stones are you can think of them kind of like the Infinity Gems, the Infinity Stones, however you want to look, whichever version. Ultimately, so the Infinity Stones, you get the Power Gem, you become more powerful. The Reality Gem, you can warp reality. The Norn Stones give a boon like that, but it caters to whatever you need. Right? And it might not even work if you don't need it or you don't want it, right? But the Norn Stone, essentially, whatever boon happens, it does whatever you feel the need for it to do. So the actual Avengers get a boon from these Norn Stones, right? And so everybody's essentially fighting plus, and Loki has got these Norn Stones, and he's boosting all the other, he's playing the support role, and he's boosting all the other Avengers, making them stronger. But the Void is, like I said, he fought so many people, and he's like, wow, these guys are pretty strong. They feel stronger than they should be. What's going on? And then he notices when he's fighting Thor that Thor's boon is, Thor is much stronger than he normally is, and Thor, as far as Sentry's concerned, Thor's, versions of Thor can be there with Sentry. It's pretty close, right? Sentry's typically stronger than Thor, but Void is like, no, Thor's too strong. I sense mischief. So he turns his eyes he looks around and he sees Loki and he's like, "You're screwed." And Loki's like, I'm screwed." And then very similar to Scarlet Witch's No More Mutants, Void essentially gets a hold of Loki, and then you see in this panel right here, Loki looks back and it's his last words, and he looks at Thor and he goes, "I'm sorry, brother." And the Void straight up bursts him out of existence, dead. Like, erases him from fabric of space and time, whatever. But just like in the According to Scopely, beforehand, Loki tricked Hela into taking Loki's name out of the Book of Hell, so he can't necessarily die, so he is reborn. So with this, eventually we find Thor going and finding this new Loki. But afterwards, he dies, and then Iron Man is like, well, this isn't going well. The Void, like, no one here can kill the Void. There's nothing we can do. Helicarrier, yeah, hey, is anybody up there? Oh, yeah, you're on there. You have 30 seconds to get, was it 30? I didn't write it down. He essentially calls up to the Helicarrier. He's like, "Is anybody up there?" And they're like, "Yeah, there's a couple people." And he straight up is like, "You have 30 seconds to get off there." And they're like, "Why?" He's like, "Just get off." And he gets off, and he literally, he reprograms the Helicarrier, and he kamikazes the Helicarrier into the Void, which hits the Void hard enough to knock him out, turning him, and the Void works very similar. Sentry himself doesn't. The Void works similar to the Hulk, right? So he gets taken over, and then the Hulk's in control. It's not Bruce Banner, so in this situation, it's not Robert. So he gets knocked out, and he reverts back to Robert Reynolds, and he's like, well, you know, he's knocked out, but he gets, Thor approaches him, and Thor's pissed. I mean, he killed Loki, right? He killed his brother, so Thor's pissed. And he approaches him, and he's like, Robert Reynolds, he wakes up, and his eyes are all corrupt, he's all messed up looking, and he's like, "Kill me, please kill me." And Thor's like, "No, you're gonna atone for the sins you've done against my brother." And then the Void emerges, and right as the Void's emerging, like right at that perfect changing time, Thor realizes he has no other choice, and he takes Mjolnir and he thunderstrikes the shit out of him, and he absolutely and utterly decimates the Void, and he kills Robert Reynolds in the middle of the transition. And in like a kind of almost a Viking honor ceremony or whatever, he takes Robert Reynolds and he flies him to the sun, and he throws his body into the sun, like just getting rid of him. So even though he said he wasn't gonna kill him, he straight up murks him. But that's how Siege ends, and then Norman Osborn, he's running. He's like, "F this noise, I'm out of here." And Captain America's like, "Nope, no you're not. You're going to jail." And that's how Siege ends. But yeah, boom, Siege. Next up, Kid Loki. So immediately following, how do we get Kid Loki? Who is Kid Loki? So, he is reborn in Paris as Sarar or what have you. So ultimately, this is just a kid. He's just a kid, and Thor knows he's going to be reborn. Thor like senses it. So he goes out of his way, and he's looking everywhere for Loki, trying to figure out how this kind of ended up happening. Where is he? Whatever. And he finds him in Paris. He has no idea who he is. He has no clue what's going on. And he grabs Loki, and he's like, "You're my brother, blah 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 blah." And Loki's like, "You're a crazy old man. I don't understand what's going on. Get away from me." But eventually he kind of believes him, and Thor low-key kidnaps him. I said it. He kidnaps him, more or less. He doesn't. It's willful. I don't know. It's a little suspect because he is reborn, so he does technically have, like, he's a foster kid or whatever. I don't know. It's kidnapping still. But he takes him to Asgard to train him, and everybody in Asgard's like, "Hey, do you remember what just happened in the Siege comic storyline?" They all say that, just like that. They say, "Oh yeah, see, Bendy." They're like, "Do you remember what happened in the Siege story that we just finished? Loki pretty much tried to kill all of us and got himself killed. Why are we bringing him back here? F that guy." And Thor's like, no, we need to train him. And so Kid Loki, essentially, so erase Loki from your mind, really. This is a kid. This is just a kid who finds out that he has some powers. His powers are not developed. They're not strong. He's really just trying to, he's discovering all of this stuff for himself by himself at his own pace. No help from Odin, no formal training. Like, he's trying to get training here. Everyone hates him. Which is really cool, and I'm not going to talk about this with notable events because I don't have that much time, but Kid Loki relates a lot to mutants, right? So in the Marvel Universe, mutants are hated for being mutants, so that automatically when you're found out that you're a mutant, you are being treated negatively, whatever. So there's a lot of stories where Kid Loki is running around with the New Mutants or various X-Men teams, and he's never affiliated with them because he's not a mutant, but everyone hates him so much because of who he used to be, which is why he doesn't want to be that person later, right? So there is a situation where Galactus comes, one of the many situations where Galactus comes and he's like, I'm gonna eat Earth. And Asgard is still, after Siege, Asgard is still on Earth. So all the Avengers are getting together to fend off Galactus, fight Galactus, kind of push everything away. And Kid Loki's like, everybody hates him, but he's like, well, Galactus goes for the World Heart, right? So what if I just hid the World Heart? So Kid Loki hides the World Heart, and that distracts Galactus because he's like, what's going on? I don't know where to eat. KFC's closed, and the World Heart's gone. What do I do? And so he hides it, and that kind of gives them the key to. He helps save a lot of people, and then that gives them the key to defeat Galactus and make the invasion stop. Thor is pissed when he finds out. He's like, you deceitful little guy, you didn't say nothing to anybody, you didn't help me out, whatever. And he grabs him by the neck and he's like, I'm gonna freaking kill you, right? Because he's afraid that this mischief is going to turn him into old Loki, which is what everybody's been saying. And then you see like Kid Loki crying, being held by Thor by the neck. You see Kid Loki crying, and he's like, you're just like everybody else hates me, I did the right thing. Sorry, I'm very I don't know if you can tell, I'm very sympathetic to Kid Loki. I love Kid Loki. But he's like, you're like everybody else, whatever, and Thor, like, lets him go, and he's like, oh my god, like, I'm abusive as hell, I'm so sorry, like, I didn't mean it, like, you have the potential, whatever. So, from there, he saves the world, and it's like, woohoo. But eventually he gets this riddle, and once he solves it, it's a riddle that he sent himself from, his past life, whatever. He solves it, and he ends up in this dark chamber where he runs into an old version of Loki himself, Ickol, eventually. And this Loki is like, hey, like, you confused with me. Without me being present, there's going to be this big evil in the world. I will give you all your powers back, whatever. And Kid Loki's like, no. I'm like, I've been through this. I'm not going to turn into you. This is what's gonna happen. And then he's like, boom, I'm gonna sorcery you. And he sorceries old Loki into a bird, right? So, and he names the bird Ickol, which is Loki backwards, and he turns him into a magpie. So Kid Loki has this bird, this magpie, flying around with him, and he talks to him, and it's his other half. It's essentially evil Loki and Kid Loki working together a lot, right? So in Marvel Strike Force, where we have Kid Loki running around with this alligator, Loki teen, he's loosely, you can tell he's a mix. His design is a mix between the comic books and the MCU, and then he's got the alligator from the MCU. But actual Kid Loki does run around with an animal companion, and is Ickol, this bird, right? Which is just another Loki who's kind of more or less reluctantly training him in the ways of sorcery and stuff like that. So I don't know why Marvel Strike Force went the way they went with it. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, that's essentially how we get Kid Loki, and then he joins the Young Avengers. He's running around with the New Mutants. Anything with Kid Loki is worth the read. I swear to God. Super fun. All right, so moving on. Power level. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power level, but here at Frosty Features, we do. So the way this works, if you are a multiversal power, that means you are a threat to all of reality, not just yours, but every other reality as you know it. You could end the multiverse on your own. Universal means you are a threat to your reality, maybe hop on over to another one and end that one. Excuse me. Cosmic means that you are a threat on a planetary scale. You can take out planetary-sized bodies, maybe even solar systems or galaxies with enough time and effort. Nuclear means you have power equal to that of a nuclear bomb. You can level small cities up to maybe a planetary body with that effort. Super Soldier means that you are human plus in every way. Speed, strength, reflexes, etc. You are beyond human capability. I don't care what people say, right? So you are beyond able to level things like a brick wall or a city block, depending on the situation. City level means that you are essentially our CIA, or you are our CIA agent type, super spies, super trained soldiers, mercenaries, our actual peak human people in Marvel. Very much thinking about like a Frank Castle here. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and on his own, he's not really worth anything, right? So due to undead Asgardian physiology, and just for the sake of flippant argument, if I have a trash bag full of plastic cups from some sort of eclectic little fun little restaurant, and a lot of anger and a good swinging range, I theoretically, as a regular human being, could take on Greg. So, in the case of Kid Loki, what we are looking at is a power level of, I hit that on the wrong computer, a power level of nuclear. So, there is no proof of this. Here's my reason. Kid Loki is much, much weaker than Loki. Loki being firmly planted in that cosmic area, right? Sometimes even pushing, when you get to God of Stories, Loki pushing into that universal spectrum, even multiversal even. But typically we've got a cosmic level, low to mid cosmic level Loki. Without his powers, whatever, he comes down to this nuclear level, because what powers he does have has the potential to have an effect very similar to that of like a nuclear bomb. Even being able to hide the world heart the way he did takes a lot of power. So Kid Loki, even though not knowing his sorcery even half as well as Loki, being even kind of strong, is pretty solidly planted in that nuclear level. And looking at according to Scopely, this background, the way this is described is fine, right? It's very short, but it very much leans into Kid Loki. That being said, why did we feel the need to call him Loki Teen? From the beginning, everybody was like, why is he Loki Teen? And it was assumed by the community, from my perspective, this is how I interpreted everybody's assumptions, was that it was the Loki from the MCU, but they hit the MCU Loki Teen is the one that he killed Thor, and he's a variant, and he's pulled out by the TVA because he killed Thor and he wasn't supposed to, right? So this is Kid Loki, and known in the comics as Kid Loki, and his background is Kid Loki, and his character is definitely designed on elements from Kid Loki and the Loki Teen from the MCU. And then we've got the Alligator from the MCU. He has comic books, he's in the comic books and stuff too, but we really only see him interact with the Teen Loki in the MCU. But since the MCU is owned by Disney and all Disney princesses have an animal companion, it's the wrong animal companion. You used the comic book background for Loki Teen for Kid Loki, but you did not use the comic book animal companion, which is Ickle the bird. So, for some reason, and maybe it's not that much of a surprise, Scopely got it twisted. It all goes to the same place, right? They use the MCU stuff where they felt like it, and the comic book stuff where they felt like it, and they named him Loki Teen instead of Kid Loki for some reason. But regardless, super neat character. It's going well. Yeah. So that's Frosty Features Kid Loki. I hope that you had a good time. Please let me know your favorite Kid Loki moments in the chat, or maybe let me know some cool stuff you've already done with the character. He's out. You can use him now. Some cool effects that you had happen. Some good counters for using Kid Loki in Marvel Strike Force. As a reminder, I stream every Sunday on Twitch at the link above at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we film Frosty Features live. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. I hope that you all have a fantastic, fantastic week, and most importantly, y'all, stay cool.